Hello, Billy Ray Huzzy with Southern Folk Pottery Collector Society in Bennett, North Carolina. I just want to welcome you for a few moments to talk about our sale number 57 and just hit some of the highlights right here in a minute and maybe shed some light on some different topics for a few moments. So anyway, just to lead off, right here of course is some patriarchs of Southern 20th century face jugs, Lanier Metters from northeast Georgia. Cleveland area. And down here's a few pieces of Burley Craig, is over in Vale, North Carolina. And some pieces, we'll come back to these in just a little while. We're going to talk about these. Here's some more right here. A Mississippi face jug, which is one or two known. A couple of other things, and we'll come back to this area again. So it's safe to be that way, but we'll come back. Let's come on down here just a moment. Just some various things here, some red wire plates. These are interesting. These are grease lamps, which is the way they lit their homes back in the late 17th century, probably before that earlier, but they would use grease and little rolled wicks out of cloth and light them, and that was the light they had in their houses. And some art pottery, again, Catawba Valley, North Carolina, down here with some of the swirl wire propes and Reinhardt. The propes originated the two-color swirl wire. And then I'll move over here for just a moment. And here we got a unique piece here, combination. And these come almost directly from the family. A little time has lapsed, but a grave marker here. And it's marked with the potter's name, which is J. Jordan. And here is the stamp, J. Jordan, which was Jesse Jordan. This would date to probably about 1870s. And here is a photograph of him, which is rare, the only one known. And if you can see right here, he's even got a little jug sitting on the crest of his armpit right there. So that's a really unique piece to have him with the face, with the jug and him in there, which is really good. And his Civil War New Testament and the coggle wheel that went along here as he made his coggle decoration while it was on the wheel turning. So that's a real unique two items there. These pieces are 20th century glaze pieces for the Charlie Almond or C.R. Almond shop at Seagrove. And the glaze, this abstract glaze, was by, pardon the way this sounds, but a dry cleaner from Bloomington, Indiana, whose name was Charles Maston. I'm sorry, M-A-S-T-E-N, sorry. And when he would do this, he came down and was fascinated with North Carolina pottery, and he saddled up with C.R. Almond, and he lived there for several months out of the year. And the family oral history says that he would actually lock himself into a little log cabin where he lived there when he was there, boarded. And he would shut the shutters, and the building still stands on the northern part of Seagrove. And he would pull the shutters on the windows, lock the door, because he didn't want anybody, even the Almond family members, to know how he did this. And some pieces have codes and or dates, like this is 5-35, which could be May 1935. But he was gone by that time, so we feel that this is a glazed code right here. And he was just a marvel with glazes, as per that piece there shows there. And some early pieces of J.H. Owens, who was like the transitional potter from the early 1900s into the 20s. He died in 23. Worked with Jock Busby and Juliana Busby at Jugtown Pottery. So he was sort of the transitional early art potter of the time frame. And if you'll take just a moment here and look at these early 20th century art pottery pieces, I think you'll have quite an eye feast there, and we'll be back in just a moment. And we're back. See there? It's like a bad check. I keep returning. Okay, keep coming back. The Mississippi face jug, can't just say enough about it. We did some research, can't discover who the maker is, but we know this thing dates to the late 1800s. And Georgiana Greer, which was a real well-known lady from Texas, from San Antonio, if I'm not mistaken. And this is the second one known of this one, of this style. But at any rate, we'll focus a little bit, and of course, a piece attributed for the Kirkpatricks out of Anna Pottery in Anna, Illinois. And here's an Ohio piece with the hat and all, and he was using a doorstop, took a little damage. Thomas Chandler, decorated pitcher from Edgefield, South Carolina. Chandler was just a premium potter. And a couple of other local potters from that era in the 1860s, 70s, J.P. Bodie and G.P. Siegler. But we'll focus on this for just a moment here. Edgefield face jug. I know there's a lot of these have been coming to light lately. We've handled many of these back in the years. And we've discovered some things. Mostly this photograph right here has come into play more so than ever, because this center man, and these were slaves from the Edgefield district of South Carolina. And of course this photograph is probably about 1870 or 1880. But the middle man here is so important because his name is Romeo. Okay? And Romeo, through some society files from the late Howard K. Smith, Howard discovered that a Romeo was working at the Colonel Thomas Davies site in Bath, South Carolina, in the late 1850s, early 1860s. And we talked with the Holcombs, a family down in Simpkinville, South Carolina. And Joe used to think they were real well and highly respected for their research in Edgefield pottery. And we sort of talked unofficially but officially that these flat tops, there's about 3 different makers that we've identified in Edgefield as slaves making these face jugs. But these flat top ones, we feel, were possibly made at the Thomas Davies site. So, taking that theory and running a moment with it, if Romeo could have made face jugs while working at the Thomas Davies shop, then it's possible that this particular one with a flat top could have been made by Romeo. And there's another maker that has the pointed ear centers, and then there's a double collar neck, and ones with other teeth and different eyes and eyebrows. So there's 3 different makers at this present time that I'm aware of. But I want to talk to you in just a moment concerning the slaves, because just recently, over some fascination with slaves, as well as in conjunction with the exhibition going on right now at the Metropolitan Museum in New York, they have really raised right a bit of interest in the slave-made face jugs. But there were slave potters there, and the question is, first, a 2-part discussion here. I'll try to make it as brief as I can. But anyway, somebody said, well, how do you know a slave potter's work from a trained potter's work? And you know, there was English potters there, John Bartlam, Harvey Drake. There were some potters that worked there, Cogburn, Massey, Bussell, who went to Washington County, Georgia later. Some even migrated west through Alabama and into Texas. The Wilsons, which was a black potters that worked at Edgefield, set up a pottery in Texas. There was the Wilson Pottery, and there's the Wilson Foundation for the study of that particular pottery. But somebody asked me 3 or 4 different times just recently, how do you know the difference? Well, the trained early potters, if you look sort of like, let's say this Daniel Siegel, for instance. Now I know we may be splitting hairs here, but for the most part, if you look at these Catawba Valley pieces, and they come in Edgefield too, and I don't have any to show you, so I'm using these examples. The trained potters come out of the old world style where they had a very tapered base with a very pronounced bulbous shoulder, and you see this, okay? And that's one trait that lets you know that's a trained potter that comes through the Master Apprentice program. And that even slid into North Carolina with the redwire makers up in Forsyth County. But as you look at these here, they're wider bottoms, still a bulbous shoulder, but not so definitive. And different styles of tops. And the handles are slid way up on top, like this one here. See the way they did this one here as well? and that one there. Whereas the trained potters had a different way of putting on their handles, and their handles are a little bit more cruder, they're thicker. But that's the way I identify slave potters who were trained by these trained potters that was already working in Edgefield out of the Landrum school, if you will. And these potters just diminished. We don't know really why they left. Harvey Drake died early, we know that. But these potters just dissipated. And so the slaves were really the main potters through the 20s, the Pottersville Stoneware Manufacturing Company and some of the other shops, Lewis Miles, Collar Rhodes. Thomas Chandler even had 2 or 3 slaves working with him, but he was a real trained potter, and that's a whole different can of worms. But we'll stay with the slaves. Another thing that's come up is the markings that appear. I don't have a lot of them at this point, but we've had many of them. And such as this one right here, this is a little circled cross, they call it. It's really like an X instead of a cross, but it is a cross bar. And there's different versions of this. One real well known is from the B.F. Landrum site, which obviously employed slave potters there. But there are a lot of markings that'll be at the base of the pots for the most of it. Okay, you'll have double lines, vertical lines. You'll have letters such as backward C's, E's. You'll have horseshoes of different kinds. You'll have a Roman numeral 1 or an I, whichever we want to look at, in different sizes, from a teeny tiny to one about an inch or so long. And we've had all these marks, and maybe that'll be a discussion for another day. We did a newsletter article back years ago on these markings. And people say, well, years ago it was almost a scenario that people were calling these were slave markings. But over the years, there's been some research, but there's no way we'll ever know. And any past generation or anything that study history or archaeology, there's no way to put yourself into that situation and understand it fully without actually have been there. And of course, we don't have anybody that would have been there, obviously, because of time. But we think that they could have been production marks, to keep up with how much pottery that potter made when he worked there. And if so, some of the letters could have been for the potters. That's one thing. Another theory is that it could have been shop, I don't want to use the word logo, but for the lack of a better word, a destination or a site marking, because there were a lot of shops during the 1810s, 20s, and 30s, and 40s even into Edgefield. Of course, we know about Dave Drake, who learned to pot under Harvey Drake, and there's X's that are used. So you run into a lot of scenarios. So I'm just touching a base just to help you out a little bit to understand some of the slave and trained potters of that time frame in that particular era, as well as the place. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this talk. This is our auction, and here's our catalog. Got them, of course, we got the picture of Romeo and the other 2 men, which I don't have their names right on top of my head or tip of my tongue. The little head over here, the humidor, is from the South Carolina Pottery Company and dates to about 1860s, 70s. That's a unique piece. Then the front cover, of course, we got some art part pieces, Thomas Chandler's piece, and again, the Edgefield face jug, the grade marker. So give us a call. We'll talk a little bit more about it at 336-581-4246, or better yet, just come see us. All right, thank you so much for your time. Goodbye.